بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين. Just to think about last week we very briefly recapped all of the life of the Prophet ﷺ from the time when he was born, from his birth all the way through till he was 42 years old. So we recapped from 1 to 40, and then we looked into a little bit more detail, because obviously at the age of 40 the Prophet ﷺ received prophethood. So then from 41 and 42 his life is very different to that which it was before he received prophethood. So when he became a prophet, he was now receiving revelation from Allah, and we noticed a lot more focus, we noticed a lot more about his life, every year incidents, and Islam has now started as well. So now he has followers. All of these people are called Sahaba. So there's a big difference between these 2 years specifically compared to the first 40 years. So he becomes a prophet. This is the first thing. A name given to this period, which is the first 2 years and first 2.5 years, first 3 years of Islam. When the Prophet was 40 years old, he got the first wahi, and he continued to receive this until he was 43, this period which is called, which we know as the private call, the private da'wah at this time, these first 3 years. So the 3 years of the Prophet ﷺ, he was giving da'wah privately. Just pass them all to the back so the brothers at the back can have them. So this was known as the private call. So the Prophet ﷺ himself was calling privately. Now one simple reason for this, we covered this, why were the first 3 years, why were they the private call? And this is a reason everybody should know, everybody should understand, is because if we try and actually think of the people in Mecca, the one thing which they found very, very important was their idols. They wouldn't publicly tolerate anybody speaking bad about their idols in public. So now, for these 3 years, the Prophet ﷺ, he was private in his message. He wasn't publicly saying anything. So now the people of Makkah, they never had a problem with him, because the Prophet ﷺ, he's not saying anything publicly, so it's impossible for them to become an obstacle for him. So this is the biggest benefit of keeping the da'wah private. So when the da'wah is kept private, the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims, they don't have any hindrance. They don't have people coming and torturing them. They are not abused, and they are not rejected in such a different way, because it's not something which is a problem for most of the people. So this is the biggest benefit. Now obviously we have to understand the balance. There's a balance between, if you keep everything a secret and everything private, you have a disadvantage, a major disadvantage, which is that you can't speak to everybody around you. You can't reach the mass audience. So the Prophet ﷺ himself, even if he's not openly going out and giving da'wah, people will feel less comfortable coming to him and saying, I want to learn about Islam, because he isn't publicly going around talking about it. They may think he doesn't want to talk about it publicly. So this is a very important thing. Even the Prophet ﷺ himself, even though he's the Prophet, the people around him, they don't see him publicly giving da'wah. So even the average person who may be interested in Islam will be very scared to even approach the Prophet ﷺ, because maybe he's not at the position where the Prophet ﷺ wants to tell him. Because at the moment, the way the Prophet does da'wah is he goes one-to-one. He finds the person he wants to give da'wah to, and he speaks to them like this, and then they will bring their close friends. That's how the da'wah was working. So it was all private. So this is the one thing we understand. Now keeping it private has the problem, because we can't speak to the masses. The average person can't approach the Prophet ﷺ, and the message is not getting to the masses either. It's all rumors. People are just hearing the Prophet ﷺ is, he's come with a new message. The message has gone far and wide. The message went to Yemen. People in Yemen were aware of this. But generally people were not 100% aware of what exactly it was the Prophet ﷺ was proclaiming. As we can imagine, if somebody doesn't hear the Prophet ﷺ's message, they don't hear the Quran, and this is not openly being played in front of people, then people will not know the message. So this is the problem which we had. And then now we have this transformation period. We have 3 years of secret call, and now we're going to the Muslims are going to transfer from the secret call to the public call. They are going to start coming out publicly. The Prophet ﷺ is going to start coming out publicly. But even before this transition, we will notice that many of the Sahaba would have been keen to come out publicly. Does that make sense? Because they see the rewards. They think that if we come out publicly, we can speak to everybody. Everybody can know the truth and know the message. So this is the benefit that they saw. So there was a lot of keenness from the Sahaba. Again, we notice this is from the Sunnah. Yeah, this method of da'wah is from the Sunnah. To be private sometimes and to sometimes go public. So the Sunnah itself teaches us that everything is not always the same. So in one condition, in the same place, with the same people, at one point the Prophet ﷺ is saying we will be private. And the same place, the same audience, very similar amount of followers that suddenly changed. Prophet ﷺ is now saying we will be public. So this transition happens. Today we live in accordance with the Sunnah as well. So we also have to be able to relate ourselves. How do we follow the Sunnah? How do we give da'wah? What condition are we in? So again, we mentioned just before I went to Pakistan, we mentioned the 5 types of da'wah and the different things that happen there. And here we'll go from type 1 to type 2. And we have all the different types of da'wah. They're all legitimate types, but we'll try and understand them. And this is what we learn here. And the key point is that even the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, some of them were, even people described, they were a bit too keen, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gave the perfect time to become public. Yeah, because the reason the Prophet ﷺ stopped giving private da'wah and started giving public da'wah is because Allah gave the wahi of the Quran, the 2 verses came. So now this is the perfect time. Allah's decided that can't be wrong. So some of the people that decided earlier that we want to come earlier, these were people who are a little bit over keen. They got a little bit excited. So this is one understanding which the other scholars give, that these people the Prophet said, they came to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ said that at the moment we don't have enough people. So then they would listen to the Prophet and they would calm down again. But again, we see the perfection of the Sunnah, which is that at the perfect time he done this. Some people wanted to do it before, some people may have wanted to do it after, but the Prophet ﷺ, his time was the perfect time to make this change. Now before the Prophet ﷺ himself made the change, his best friend Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, this is a very famous story which we have, where Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he himself, when the Muslims were about 40 Muslims, he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said that I think we should go public with our da'wah. We've been private for too long now. Everybody should now know, we should go into the Kaaba, we should go into the streets, and everybody should find out this message. The Prophet ﷺ initially he expressed his view, which was that this is not the way to do things because we are too less. So because of the less numbers he said no. But then Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said, I understand your view, but I still think we should do it. So the Prophet ﷺ accepted, but this was led by Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. He was the leader of this march here. So now the Muslims had all agreed, they discussed this in Darul Arqam, and the Muslims agreed that yes, we will all go and give da'wah, but primarily it will be Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu giving the speech. To the extent many people who quote this narration, they say that many of the Muslims, they went to the Kaaba, but there was 40 about Muslims, most of them went and sat with their clans, with their own tribe, and just relaxed there. So that it seems like when Abu Bakr is speaking and he sees the audience, he sees one Muslim here, Muslims all throughout the audience. So it will make him a little bit encouraged, it will encourage him a little bit. So this is one of the reasons this is given, that the Muslims everywhere, and this will help Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Prophet ﷺ himself, he went with his own clan, Banu Hashim. So the Prophet ﷺ went to his clan, many of the other Sahaba went to their clan. Some of the Sahaba stayed with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, maybe 2 or 3. Then they go to the Kaaba, the Muslims spread out into their own tribes. And then Prophet ﷺ is with Banu Hashim. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu stands up and starts, this is the first time ever that there was a public proclamation given, a public da'wah to follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu called all of the people to follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and worship Allah and come to Allah. So this was the first time this happened, and obviously the people there, they got very angry. The way it's described, everybody rushed onto the Muslims that were there with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And specifically Utbah bin Rabi'ah, he is known to have been very violent. So everybody was rushing onto where the source was. The source was Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So he was the source of the speech. Everybody's thinking, let's go to him, because although there may have been other Muslims who may have been more vocal, at that point it was Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So you can imagine everybody would have gone in that direction. So Utbah bin Rabi'ah, he got there first, and he ended up, when he was on the floor, he sat on the chest of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And then the narration mentions specifically that he was wearing a shoe which had a hard sole. So now, as we know in the Arabs, very often they'll wear leather socks, for example, or these kind of slipper things. which are made out of cotton or a thick kind of leather, which are okay. But this narration mentions that the sole of the shoe of Utbah was very hard. It was a hard sole shoe. It wasn't leather, it wasn't soft cotton. Wooden. So some would say wooden, because obviously the leather at that time, they wouldn't make it hard. So like we have in our shoes, is hard from the bottom. So wooden would be, one very easy way to understand that. So the narration mentions that he was wooden, and then he used this. He was sitting on the chest of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and he used this to beat the face of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And obviously he done this a lot of times. We can imagine it's in the Kaaba, and then everybody's rushing, basically, essentially everybody's rushing the Muslims, and it's very difficult to control the situation. So then for very long, Utbah has this opportunity to continue to deface Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and continues attacking him. And he's sitting on him and attacking him. And then obviously eventually the tribe of Abu Bakr, Banu Taym, they managed to come back and they managed to push him off. They managed to take him off Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. But the simple fact was that the face of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu became unrecognizable. Some people say that the nose was completely disjointed. It was impossible to recognize him. People couldn't tell that this is Abu Bakr. He looked so different. His face had been disfigured very badly at this point. So had a very long while, because as we can imagine, in the chaos of the moment, when everybody is trying to attack the Muslims, everybody is trying to attack Abu Bakr, Utbah sits on him and takes control of the situation. And even if somebody is hitting him, he's just going for it at that time. So by the time somebody comes and forcefully pushes him off, there's other people around. So by the time people can control him and take him off, by this time he's caused a lot of problem to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Obviously he's passed out. If somebody's face if you can't tell where somebody's nose is, they're going to pass out. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was unconscious at this time, and his family took him to his mother's house. So this was the first part, where Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was attacked and taken there. Then his tribe, Banu Taym, and this is very serious, this is not a small thing. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was not somebody who was devalued in any way. He always maintained his respect. He was a very good tradesman, extremely good businessman, very well respected by everybody. In fact, we know again we're going back to just before, the last week before we had the 4-week break. The five first strong Muslims who were converted to Islam, including Abdurrahman bin Auf, including Talha, including Uthman bin Affan, all of these very powerful 5 people, they were all converted by Abu Bakr. He influenced the powerful. So obviously when he was beaten up like this, his tribe were not very happy. So his tribe went to the Kaaba. They went back to the Kaaba and they took an oath that if he dies because of this attack, we will kill Utbah bin Rabi'ah. This will be our retaliation. He's murdered our person, he will be killed. So it was taken very seriously. Nobody took this lightly. And then Abu Bakr, so he was very ill obviously. People thought he is going to die. But the next day he came round. So after 24 hours he was in the condition, he came round. So obviously it was a big thing. The whole entire tribe leader has said, we will kill the murderer of our person. Now the family obviously at his house, everybody's worried. If you think of the scene, he's been knocked unconscious for 24 hours. Even if that happened today in our amazing NHS service, even then we'd be worried. If somebody's in a 24 hours, it's unthinkable. Imagine if that happened with us. Somebody was attacked while going home or something like this, and 24 hours they were out. There was no response from them. So anyway, he finally came round after 24 hours. And then this is where we see one of the most amazing things from the life of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. The one story here. Now even though he had been attacked, because he was, if you remember again, the mentality of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he was in the Kaaba and he was attacked because of Islam. The founder of Islam, so-called the person who brought the wahi from Allah, was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So now when Abu Bakr is giving da'wah, he's calling everyone to the Prophet. Now the people are attacking Abu Bakr because he is doing the da'wah. But essentially he's worried that I'm giving da'wah, but I'm calling everybody to follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he was worried that the health of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, maybe somebody attacked him as well. If I've been attacked like this, maybe he was attacked as well. Maybe people went after him. If I am not even the Prophet, I'm not saying follow me, I'm saying follow him. So imagine how he may have been attacked as well. So Abu Bakr is thinking this. So when 24 hours after being knocked unconscious, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu comes back to life, the first question he asks is, how is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because of this fear that he had in his mind, despite his own condition. And then his family obviously were there. Remember the seriousness of the condition. He's been out for 24 hours. All his family are there waiting for him to come back to, well, waiting for him to either be declared as passed away or for him to come and wake up. So when he says this, some of his family get very angry and they just go and they go home. They're happy that obviously he's alive, but they say, how he's thinking about the Prophet who's given him all this trouble in the first place. So they got very upset and some of them went home. Obviously they were not Muslims. His mother obviously looked after him and took care of him. She brought him food. But the thing is, he wasn't just saying this like as kind of a ritual. He wasn't saying how is the Prophet because he wanted people to think that he cared about the Prophet. It was completely sincere. He actually cared about the health of the Prophet ﷺ. Sometimes we don't realize this, which is why then when his mother came again with the food, he asked her again that how is the Prophet ﷺ? I actually want to know, I need to know this. So she's coming with food, he's been out for 24 hours and he's saying that he's still actually genuinely worried about the health of the Prophet ﷺ. So he asks his mother, how is it? You might know, how is he? She says, I don't know. She took an oath by Allah that I don't know how the Prophet ﷺ is. So Abu Bakr is very worried now. So then he tells his mother that go and ask Jamil, who's the sister of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh. Go and ask her because she will know how the Prophet ﷺ is. So then the mother of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh went to Jamil, but Jamil who knew the condition of the people, she wouldn't tell Abu Bakr's mother. She wouldn't tell Abu Bakr's mother about the news of the Prophet. Because remember, we're still in the secret call. And even then, many people, even after the open call, they kept their Islam a secret. So now, there was a trust between the Muslims, which wasn't between anybody else. So the Muslims would trust each other, but because we know that Muslims, their own relatives would end up torturing them, so Muslims ended up trusting nobody except Muslims. So now we've got the mother of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh who's the first Khalifa, who's the best friend of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who's what we can call the main Muslim after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But his mother, another person who doesn't trust his mother to tell him this information. So this is how close the Muslims were. And this is what we learned. The benefit of the secret call was the Muslims learned Islam. They were able to trust one another and really develop a bond of unity within one another. Another benefit of this 3-year secret call, we think, oh, nobody found out anything. But so many benefits that were found and why this time was perfect. So this is the first open call. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, to continue with the story, he then asks Jamil, his mother goes to ask Jamil, she says, I can't tell you because this is, I can tell Abu Bakr. So she brings Jamil back to her house and then she tells Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, asks her, how is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Again she says, your mother is listening, we can't say it publicly. He says, no, don't worry, she's okay. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anh reassured her about her mother, about his mother, and then she told Abu Bakr that he's fine. So he's got what we call in hadith terminology, khabr wahid. We've got, nowadays we know this as somebody's told you, a reliable person has told you. Like somebody tells you that Ipswich Road is closed. So if somebody says it's closed, then instead of going right at the end of this road, we'll go left and go the other way. If somebody tells us that, if somebody reliable tells us this. So now this is what happens in hadith when we pass on a hadith. But generally now here, he's been told by a reliable source that the Prophet ﷺ is fine. But after this, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh says that I am not going to have food or drink until I myself see the Prophet ﷺ. There's different types of believing. One is somebody tells you. Another type is when you see yourself or you experience yourself. This is another type of yaqeen. If I see something myself, I believe it to a higher degree than that if I've only seen it. If I've seen it live, you believe it more than if you've seen it in a picture. And if you've heard about it, you'd believe it more if you've seen it. So all of these have different levels of believing. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, even though he's had the first level, he says, I need to see the Prophet ﷺ myself before I am happy and content. So then he doesn't eat and he says that I'm going to go and see the Prophet ﷺ. Then Jamil told him that the Prophet ﷺ is in the house of Arqam. So the Prophet ﷺ went to his house and he met the Prophet ﷺ, and obviously he went to the Prophet ﷺ and they embraced and they kissed. And you can see the love that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he then says that I don't really care what happens to me or my face. In fact, one point we missed out is, when Jamil came and saw Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, she actually screamed because the way that his face had been disfigured was just something which she couldn't imagine. She couldn't tolerate it. She actually let out a scream at that point. That's how disfigured he was. And now because of this story, some of us, we're just thinking about the love Abu Bakr radiallahu anh has for the Prophet. And we've forgotten how much pain he would have been, how badly he was disfigured at this point. But how badly he was disfigured when Jamil walked in. She'd been called by the mother of Abu Bakr that, how is the Prophet? When she saw him in that condition, she screamed. She couldn't control herself at that point. So now, going back into this, the Prophet Abu Bakr radiallahu anh then went, and when he was walking to the house, obviously he couldn't walk himself. So he was carried by the two women, his mother and Jamil. They both supported him to the place where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was. Then he met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said, I don't care what happens to me, what happens to my face, all I'm worried about is that you are okay. And this shows the love that Abu Bakr radiallahu anh had for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is the main thing that we have. Then after this, the small incident is that Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he's very worried. He trusts his mother a lot, and he loves his mother obviously a lot, but his mother's not Muslim yet. So then he tells the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that my mother is a very, very good woman, so please pray for her that she becomes a Muslim. And then his mother also became a Muslim. So this was the dua of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and eventually she ended up becoming a Muslim because of this dua. This is something which is very happy. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam obviously made Abu Bakr radiallahu anh very happy.